Antike. So, I like it, but I like the rondel mechanism a lot. I think Imperial does a better job towards meeting my tastes and still using that mechanism, but that doesn't mean that I didn't want a second game on it, and having the original seems the most apropos for my tastes. There are a few flaws, and they probably got cleaned up in the second version. There are little tweaks that need to be made. For example, the first player always being the same person. Man, that has some definite issues regarding it. Top components, nice wooden pieces, yeah. The counters, also high quality. Honestly, nothing wrong with any of the components to this one. You get some nice little sturdy player aids, which are going to be a problem to fit back in the box, but these are the cards. The cards, you don't have to shuffle them or anything. It really doesn't matter. They're fairly good quality, but they're not going to be tested in any sense. So I don't need to bother with sleeving them. There's no hidden information on them. The map board, I really like. This isn't the whole thing, of course, but in part because it's double-sided. So if you run through, too much on this, you have a broader, we call it the West Med, but it's really a larger portion of the board because you still have Ankara and Greece in here. And I kind of wish I had played on that, just because I had played on this one before. I had kind of the thought of it would be nice to play not so much the same map as I did last time, but the older map in terms of the older era. I just think somehow it fits the mood of the game, the spirit of the game better to reach back that far, because the people, the personages that you're collecting as victory points are mostly from that older era. So it would be somewhat incongruous to me in order to have those people show up on the later map. But I think the later map gives a little bit more, maybe a little bit more power to the naval exploration. One of the victory conditions that's hardest to reach unless you really stretch for it is the navigator conditions. Yeah, you can probably get one of them if you're a seafaring nation, and there's more of those because it's all sort of one sea in the middle of the board in the on the other board. But getting to 14 sea areas, that's kind of rough on this board. I saw someone do it the one time I played, and they ended up winning the game. And that's kind of the thing in the game that we played here. The person who got one ended up winning the game, because it is that extra edge that if you can use a naval strategy, then you have this extra advantage. My worry is actually that the Western map, the naval strategy becomes a little too powerful, and therefore that's no longer an edge, that becomes part of the core of the game. And I kind of like it on this map where it's something you have to work hard to get a second point for, and you're almost certainly not going to get more than a couple of points off of it. It's hard to get more than a couple of points in any one realm, but you do want to specialize early on. That's fairly clear. For one thing, your production, if you have your production spread out kind of evenly, you're going to end up not being able to get early power in any of these things, you're going to be spending too many turns moving around the rondel, you know, hitting all your production, because that's the only way that you get an advantage over other people. One of the things about the game is that there's very clearly a few different ways that you can approach in terms of victory. First of all, there's, what, 5, 6 different decks of cards that you're able to attack, you know, to try to accomplish. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of cards. And beyond that, then the strategy guide says, you know, you have a few different choices early on. You can go for an early military, which will allow you to build more cities. And then it'll also have you poised with a bunch of troops compared to other players, which might allow you to capture a city for what that's worth. You can go with the marble start, which will get you temples, which will get you better production. Now, you get better production by having more cities too, but it's easier to concentrate your production with marble. So you can jump to an early concentration that way, which is kind of appealing. And then there's the knowledge advantage. And if you grab market early on, it's pretty valuable. Later in the game, the market advantage becomes a little weaker, and some of the military advantages become more important. It's kind of neat how the game has phases. You know, you have this initial spread, and you have this in Civilization too, but you have this initial kind of spreading out, claiming some territory. Everybody's pretty free. There's no real reason to be engaging in conflicts right away. But there might be races for certain, you know, key locations that look valuable to a couple of players. There might be races for a key technology, right? But in general, you have the ability to kind of expand to maybe not exactly where you want to, but to something viable in most cases. The map was a little crowded in 6. You had a couple of players really getting stunted, but only because they got hit militarily, you know. And if somebody is designed to build a military force and other people are not, those other people are at the first person's mercy. The military strategy is fairly powerful. What's kind of funny about a game that has so much capability for conflict in terms of the military things is often that can end up being not an attractive strategy because it ends up kind of stalemating you. Now, what we saw was the guy who did the military did end up winning, and he was in the running because he was able to expand his empire fairly heavily. He didn't really get stymied the way you could. Speaking of stymieing, this is definitely a game where it's possible for the leader to kind of run away with it and be hard to stop. It's also very much a game where it's likely that one or more players are going to get kind of sliced out of any chance of winning, which can be pretty frustrating in it because it's not a short game and it's not one where you have a terrible capability to turn that around easily. I've seen games of, say, diplomacy where somebody came back from a really weak position and was able to maybe not win, but because most games of diplomacy I've played don't end, I don't really like it play by mail and in person. After about 8 hours, people get kind of tired of it. It ends up in buddy dip. This is a game where certain agreements can benefit both players. We saw yellow and blue kind of come to an agreement that ended up helping them both. Not that blue really was ever in the running after that agreement was made, but it was a situation where they weren't going to get completely trashed by having two neighbors smash into them. But on the other hand, yellow was able to assure themselves in their corner that they weren't going to have to deal with blue, and they didn't really want to do a military strategy at that point. The neat thing about the rondel, and this is the same in Imperial, is this idea of Well, you have certain places certain things you can do, and they don't cost you anything. But if you want to accelerate to some other space, if there's something really important for you, you can pay a couple of resources and get yourself what you really need to do. I hate doing that. Other people are probably more willing to expend resources in such a fashion. But I always feel like, well, I'll get there eventually, you know. There are things I want to hit on the way. And I tend to not spend unless, A, it's really, really critical, which is very, very seldom in the game. Like the race for a technology that you'll get shut out of in terms of getting the victory points for. Or if it's a matter of, you know, all the stuff between me and there sucks, and I want to hit my arming. And, you know, honestly, I don't care about Temple's gold or maneuver at this point. None of them, you know, the only one that I can possibly get anything off of is gold. And maybe I can't even get anything off that because I've lost my gold producing cities. I don't think the 6-player game is terribly balanced. I feel like some people in the middle of the board are going to face more problems than others. But then again, it was someone in the middle of the board who had more opportunities and was able to actually smack around a couple of the other players and get themselves into a strong position where they could win from. It certainly is not balanced in terms of playstyle. The physical location that you have on the board is going to help determine what your good strategy might be. And being in a corner doesn't sound like a bad idea for most strategies. Certainly for any kind of, I want to just sit back here and produce. What about military? Well, you know, it's nice to have your back areas protected and unable to be attacked, really. So that also is appealing. I think the Mediterranean board is going to be a lot harder to hide in, so it may be more balanced than this board is. I've only played this twice, but I'm beginning to see that. There are places you probably, it's going to take a stronger player to do well. Overall, I think it holds up well as a game. It's something I'm happy to have picked up. I don't know that I'll ever get another chance to play it opposed, simply because the group I play with, there's a couple of people who I'm less likely to play with, who are more into doing repeated plays. This probably isn't going to be attractive to them for a number of reasons. I'm out of conflict, the length of the game, a few other things. And you know, with it not sitting in the shop, it's also less likely to get played. I'm probably the only person who has it now out of the group. I'm not positive, but I basically bought it off one of the other guys who's kind of into, yep, played it once, that's good. You know, I think he takes it home, plays it solitaire, gets a familiarity with it, comes up with a strategy, brings it in, plays it with us. And I'm okay with that, you know. We have a couple of people who are kind of like that, who want to study a game a little bit and then test out their theories, and that's fine. It leaves you at kind of a disadvantage in terms of, you know, they know what they want to play. I don't feel like that's the driving reason behind it, though, so it's okay. It doesn't bother me that way. Anyway, you know, that playing time at 90 to 120 minutes, that seems a little short in 6 players. I think probably in 3 or 4 with people who kind of know what they're doing, you can have that. But I know that we always have analysis paralysis when I'm playing opposed, just the group. And it includes me, and I'm not the worst by any means. But the, you know, you saw how much video there was. Sure, I'm talking through the turns. They take longer than if everybody's really focused on the game and playing straight through. But I think that playing time should take into account that most groups don't just zone into the game completely. There's usually some social interaction going on. There's usually somebody with analysis paralysis. It probably takes a little longer. Overall, though, I think it's fun. I think the topical, handling, obviously, it's something that interests me. Hey, civilization, gave me wood. This game probably would have as well at that point in time. Now it feels a little less, less of an exciting, wow, this really moved into a different direction. Although, obviously, the rondel was sort of the big thing with this. And then Imperial came up with what I think is a superior design with the rondel. And I think a couple more games tried it, and it just didn't really hit on all wheels for everything else. This is probably passed out of the cult of the new era completely, even though a second edition came out as well. And it's just, it's not what people want to do anymore, and that's fine. I'm glad I got a chance to explore it, even though maybe I didn't have the most fun that I could have with it. But that's not the game's fault, really. That's my life. I guess that's about it. I don't know when I'm going to be able to get Cataclysm going, but soon, maybe next. But I got counters to clip still. There aren't all that many. All right, let's send this up.